Hey, what's up, everyone? Dragon back again, here to tell you that you should be reading Sphere. So, Sphere is a 1987 science fiction novel written by the late Michael Crichton, who a lot of you guys probably know for other books like Jurassic Park and Congo. And basically, it involves or revolves around a research team who go down in the deep Pacific Ocean to basically research like an uncovered spacecraft for an craft kind of an unknown origin, so to speak. And while doing so, discover a sphere, this large, round shape that they don't really understand what it is, how it works, what its purpose is, essentially. And through the course of this, expedition and this kind of this in-depth analysis, members of the crew start dying. A lot of them started dying basically at the hands of a giant squid. For those of you guys remember, for like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, that kind of thing, a large, kraken-like creature of some sort. And essentially, it's in addition to that, this research team is noticing that some of the life around the area is, displays peculiar. I can never say that word. Odd, kind of evolutionary attributes, or rather mutations, so to speak. And in addition to all that, a lot of the people involved are kind of going mad to some degree, in the sense that nothing seems like it is as it should be. Everything around them seems wrong. It is almost like as if they're descending into madness. And the more stressed out and frustrated and just bewildered by what's happening they are, the kind of crazier things around them seem to get. And without spoiling, because it's one of those stories where if I go too much into detail as to what is happening and why, it kind of gives away the whole kind of surprise of the book. Essentially, throughout the entire read, you're kind of asking yourself, what is going on? What is this fear? What is its connection to, what's happening around these characters, and more specifically, to these characters? And it's essentially kind of the truth you, as the reader, and the characters are trying to uncover throughout the story. Now, one of the interesting takeaways I had from this book was essentially using, or rather kind of shining a light on the idea that perhaps the greatest threat we face is our own mind, in a weird way. In this bizarre kind of turn of events, it is almost like the imagination of a child that is essentially this thing that we usually kind of covet as this wonderful thing. A child's imagination is this magical, splendid, creative device in which we can kind of create something out of nothing, but perhaps made literal, can be a very dangerous, self-destructive weapon, a tool that can be used against an individual, even themselves. And it's really the horrors they kind of face, or kind of the psychological upheaval they encounter, is essentially limited only by their own minds, their own imaginations. And throughout the course of the story, starting to realize that perhaps their own minds are that which is working against them. So much so that they begin to have to question the nature of their reality, what it is around them they see, how much of it is real, is it real, if it's not real, how is it not real, yet they're seeing it. It becomes essentially an assault on, the senses, an assault on the faculties that we rely so heavily upon to kind of make sense of everything around us. So essentially, the story is essentially a bit of a head case. It starts off one way, and leads you to believe it's going to be kind of one kind of story, when in actuality it goes a completely different route, and it kind of subverts your expectations. And much like the characters in the story, you realize that what you come to expect is not what you're going to get, and that what you're perceiving as to be what's happening in the story may not actually be the case. And like them, you start to kind of question what it is that's happening to you. When you're reading something from chapter to chapter, you begin to kind of, like them, second guess it. Like, is this true? Is this real? What does it mean? How does this affect? How is this possible? And you start to kind of, hopefully, not going insane like some of these characters, you can't help but feel frustrated and confused, and yet you push on. You want to keep reading. You want to understand what it is, because usually that's kind of how madness sets in. It is a unyielding need to understand that which eludes you. It is this kind of this almost this quest in which you have to know, you have to conquer it, you have to make sense of it. You can't just, and the further you go, the more impossible it almost feels to let it go, because by that point you feel like, well, if I stop now, I've wasted so much time before that. So the only way to justify all that time and energy is to get a result, is to get a conclusion, is to, have some kind of understanding. And because of that, you go down further and further into the rabbit hole, as it were, until eventually you just can't get back out. So it's an interesting story in the sense that it does to the reader, I mean, much more mildly so, what the story is doing to the characters, and that is, it is pulling them deeper into this rabbit hole. It is driving them a bit mad, in the sense of trying to understand what it is that is driving them mad to begin with, and how it all kind of connects back to this sphere, this strange alien object that defies convention, defies our knowledge, our scientific reasoning, and yet seems to be at the root of everything that is happening. And it's this quest, this pursuit of knowledge, this need to know instinctive drive that propels this story forward, both in terms of the narrative for the characters and, just what's written on the page for you, the reader. But with that said, there's nothing too much more I can really get into with this, and I know that might sound like a bit of a cop-out, so I apologize, because it's never my goal with these videos to try to be like, well, I think it's pretty cool, and, I think you'll think it's cool too, so go check it out. Obviously, I want to kind of, sell these stories to you, but understand that it's what you don't know that makes this story such a fun read, that it's what makes this book compelling. And that's one of the things that Michael Crichton was always great at doing, was that finding an angle to his stories and leaning in hard in them, and that being the backbone of the story, that being your reasoning for wanting to keep reading the story, because there was something there that just made you need to turn the page. And that's, again, I think one of the reasons why he became such a prolific writer, such a respected writer, such a popular writer, appealing to both kind of mainstream audiences and even, readers of a more niche market. He seemed to kind of have a very broad appeal, and I think it's because he realized that it doesn't matter if you're coming from, reading just what's on the New York Times bestseller list, or, when you go to your local, or depending on when you're watching this, who knows if there'll still be bookstores, but your local little, mom and pop store where you would find random little dusty old books off the shelf and you would, read those. It doesn't really matter kind of where you come from in terms of being a reader. There was something in his writing that appealed to kind of a lot of people, like a large demographic, where everyone could kind of come together. And I think that's kind of really the secret to his success. And Sphere is a great example of that, in the sense that there is something compelling in this story, and that it makes you a silent member of this research team, and that, like them, you have to know what is going on and why. And that the more the crazier things get around you, or in this case on the page, the more it drives you. That which, kind of, from an abstract perspective, you would see that and you would think that's motivation just to drop the whole thing. Like, well, things keep getting weirder and crazier and more dangerous, that we should really back off. But within the context of the story, when you're in it, knee deep in it, you're in it, and you have to know. You have to keep pushing forward, even if the water keeps rising higher and higher. You can't stop. So for that reason alone, it's a great read, and one I highly, highly recommend. So with that said, Sphere, have you read it? If so, what did you think? How does it stack up against Crichton's other works? Is it one of your favorites? Is it one of your least favorites? Kind of where for you does it kind of fit on the list of his greatest hits, so to speak? If you have not read it, as always, I will leave links in the description section below. You can pick it up, check it out, give it a good read, come back, give me some of your thoughts. I would love to know kind of what your take is on it. And for those of you who don't know, yes, there is a film adaptation of this book, which, while not a bad film at all, and certainly actually not one of the worst book to film adaptations I don't really feel quite captured that sense of like I need to know what's happening and why that the book does. Again, it's still a good movie by any means. It's not like if you watch it, if you're familiar with the book and you watch the film, I think it'll be kind of a nice little treat in the sense that it has some hallmarks from the books that's kind of cool seeing on the big screen. And if you're not familiar with the book, I think you might just find it a cool science fiction movie. But the book is what really shines here, and I think it is a book that, quite honestly, doesn't get mentioned enough when people talk about Crichton's work. But anyway, with that said, thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace!